was sleeping. I sleep with plugs in and...
Hey, but we've been here for hours and hours and hours now, hey? Banging on your door and ringing the doorbell.
Calling your phone.
Yeah. Your relationship with Jasmine?
Good.
I mean, were you a boyfriend, girlfriend, or...?
No, just good friends. Nothing alarmed me until, of course, I got arrested. So...
What happens with you right now?
I'm just gonna wait until I get a phone call to say that I can go home. Yes.
A true crime documentary recreates the heartbreaking case that took place in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, shaking the entire nation. The story began in 2017, when Jasmine Lovett and her boyfriend, Robbie Anderson, welcomed their first child, a beautiful baby girl named Aaliyah Sanderson. At the time, they were both young and unmarried. Jasmine, in her mid-20s, was described by everyone as a kind-hearted, graceful, and determined woman. Yet, like many relationships, theirs was far from perfect behind the surface. After Aaliyah was born, the first cracks began to show. Robbie started coming home late, leaving Jasmine to manage the newborn on her own. His habits worsened as he often returned home under the influence of harmful substances. Tension grew, and before long, Robbie began showing alarming behavior. One evening, he came home in an angry mood, loudly demanding money, frightening Jasmine so much that she locked herself in the bathroom to call the police. By the time officers arrived, Robbie had already left. And since Jasmine had no visible injuries, they couldn't take further action beyond filing a report. Even so, Jasmine remained strong. Determined to protect herself and her child, she successfully obtained an emergency protection order against Robbie. However, just 13 days later, that order was lifted after both claimed they had reconciled. Although the details of what truly happened during that time were never fully revealed, what's certain is that they eventually separated. Jasmine gained custody of Aaliyah and tried to rebuild her life. Despite the breakup, both made an effort to remain respectful and cooperative for their daughter's sake, hoping to give Aaliyah the most peaceful environment possible despite the pain of the past. After months of overcoming the pain of separation, Jasmine Lovett felt it was time to open her heart and give herself a new chance. She began joining a few online dating sites, hoping to find someone who was truly serious about companionship. Before long, fate led her to meet Robert Leeming, a man who seemed to embody all the qualities she was looking for at that time. When they met, Robert was 34 years old, nearly 10 years older than Jasmine, who was still in her vibrant 20s. Although the age difference wasn't too significant, their life experiences were clearly quite different. Robert was born in the United Kingdom, but his childhood was marked by frequent moves due to his father's work in the military. That constant relocation made it difficult for him to form lasting friendships, something that deeply influenced how he connected with others as an adult. While he wasn't very skilled at face-to-face communication, Robert felt more comfortable in the online world. He spent a lot of time on internet forums, where sharing and chatting behind a screen allowed him to express himself more easily without the pressure of in-person interactions. In fact, it was in an online chat room that Robert Leeming met his first wife, a Canadian woman studying to become a teacher. They got married in 2013, and Robert moved to Canada to start a new life. The couple had a son together, but their marriage quickly fell apart. By 2017, they had officially separated, with custody of the child granted to his wife, while Robert was allowed only supervised visitation. Although the marriage ended, Robert remained in Canada thanks to his permanent resident status, which he had obtained through his work as a heavy-duty truck mechanic. After the divorce, he continued searching for love online, dating a few women before fate eventually led him to meet Jasmine Lovett. The relationship between Jasmine Lovett and Robert Leeming developed very quickly. They began dating in September 2018, and just 1 month later, Jasmine and her little daughter, Aaliyah, moved in with Robert in the Cranston area of Calgary. It was a bold decision, especially considering there was a child involved. For many, moving in together after only 4 weeks of knowing each other might seem too soon. But for Jasmine, it felt right at the time. Financially, it helped ease her burden by sharing living expenses. Moreover, having a partner to support her made life easier for both mother and daughter. At that point, Jasmine didn't have a stable job and mainly relied on child support from her ex-boyfriend while dedicating all her time to caring for Aaliyah. Robert's presence gave her a sense of security. He helped her cook, clean, and even watched over Aaliyah whenever Jasmine needed to run errands. Robert seemed to embrace his new role wholeheartedly and appeared to care for Aaliyah as if she were his own child. To Jasmine, that made her believe she had finally found a true companion. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. A small, happy family living peacefully in a quiet neighborhood. Jasmine's family also had a good impression of Robert. He joined them for family dinners, behaved politely, and showed genuine interest in both Jasmine's mother and her sister. However, Genevieve, the protective older sister, couldn't shake a sense of unease. She felt that everything was moving too fast, and although Robert always appeared gentle, there was something about him that didn't quite sit right. On April 14th, 2019, the family gathered for their usual dinner. Jasmine Lovett, Robert Leeming, and little Aaliyah attended as they always did. But this time, Genevieve, Jasmine's older sister, sensed that something wasn't right. There was a strange distance between Jasmine and Robert, an unspoken tension that hadn't been there before. Though subtle, it was enough to make Genevieve uneasy. The dinner ended peacefully, and the sisters agreed to meet again on April 19th. Good Friday, a special occasion their family always spent together. However, when that day came, Jasmine didn't show up. There were no calls, no messages. Every attempt Genevieve made to reach her went unanswered. It was completely out of character for Jasmine, who was always punctual, thoughtful, and never failed to keep in touch with her family. A growing sense of worry began to consume Genevieve. She sent more messages through Facebook, but strangely, none of them went through, as if Jasmine's account had been disconnected. Unable to sit still, Genevieve decided to drive to Jasmine and Robert's house in Cranston, Calgary, around 5 o'clock in the evening. When she arrived, she noticed the basement light was still on, a sign that someone might be home. She knocked on the door and rang the bell, but no one answered. The silence around her felt chilling. She waited a few more minutes and peered through the window, but the inside was dark. Eventually, Genevieve had no choice but to leave, trying to reassure herself that her sister was probably just busy with something, but deep down, the unease in her heart only grew stronger. 2 days later, on April 21st, 2019, Jasmine Lovett's mother, Kim, could no longer bear the silence and decided to check her daughter's house in Cranston, Calgary, herself. Just like Genevieve had done before. She knocked on the door, rang the bell, and called out her daughter's name. But there was still no answer. As she was about to leave, her eyes caught something strange near the entrance. 2 pairs of sneakers. One pair looked freshly washed, still damp, and neatly placed by the doorway. The sight sent a chill down her spine. Jasmine was always tidy, but she would never leave wet shoes inside the house. Although no one was home, Kim left a handwritten note, hoping that Jasmine or Robert Leeming would reach out soon. However, days passed without any word. By April 23rd, 4 days later, the family's concern had reached its peak. Jasmine hadn't returned any calls and had even missed the family dinner, a tradition she had never skipped. Her complete silence and absence were entirely unlike her. At first, the family tried to hold on to the hope that it was a misunderstanding, or perhaps Jasmine had gone somewhere without her phone. But as time passed in unsettling quiet, that fragile hope began to fade. Genevieve, always sensitive to the slightest change, felt her unease turning into real fear. She became convinced that something terrible had happened to her sister. Without hesitation, she went to the Calgary Police Service to file a missing person report, providing every detail she could about Jasmine's recent life, her relationships, daily routines, and even the smallest habits. Genevieve handed over her phone, answered all the questions, and assured investigators she would fully cooperate to help find Jasmine and little Aaliyah. At first, police considered the possibility that Jasmine Lovett had left voluntarily, but Genevieve quickly dismissed that theory. She insisted that her sister would never disappear without telling the family, especially not with little Aaliyah by her side. Jasmine was a loving and responsible mother, so the idea that she would vanish without a trace made absolutely no sense. Once that possibility was ruled out, investigators shifted their focus to Jasmine's ex-boyfriend, Robbie Anderson, Aaliyah's father. However, Genevieve explained that Robbie hadn't been in contact with Jasmine for a long time after their breakup, and there had been no conflict between them. After looking into it, police cleared him of suspicion. At that point, their attention turned to the man last known to be with Jasmine, Robert Leeming. And as they began digging deeper into that relationship, they uncovered a reality far more complex and troubling than it had first appeared. In December 2018, Jasmine Lovett confided in her sister, Genevieve, that her relationship with Robert Leeming had begun to fall apart, and they had even broken up. However, the two decided to continue living together in the Cranston home as roommates, a rather unusual arrangement, especially with little Aaliyah in the house. Jasmine explained that moving out with a small child would be extremely difficult and expensive, so she considered it only a temporary solution while she tried to reorganize her life. A few weeks later, she told Genevieve that she and Robert had reconciled and decided to give their relationship another chance. Still, the tension between them never truly disappeared. Jasmine also shared something deeply personal that made things even more complicated. During their separation, she had become pregnant and had to make a difficult decision to end the pregnancy. Although no one knew exactly how that choice affected her emotionally or how it impacted their relationship, Genevieve could sense that her sister was still carrying deep emotional pain and that there were unresolved issues lingering between Jasmine and Robert. As time went on, Jasmine Lovett began facing increasing financial pressure. After Roby Anderson stopped providing support for Aaliyah, Jasmine had to manage all living expenses on her own. Although she hadn't yet found a stable job, she showed strong determination to return to work, not just for financial reasons, but also to regain a sense of purpose, connect with others, and rejoin the rhythm of everyday life. Her sister, Genevieve, recalled that Jasmine sometimes felt disheartened seeing Robert Leeming leave for work every day while she stayed home caring for her daughter. These details led investigators to believe that Jasmine had no reason to disappear voluntarily. She was still working toward a better future for herself and Aaliyah. This strengthened their belief that her disappearance was not a matter of choice, but the result of something far more serious. Police immediately launched a full investigation, retracing Jasmine's final days before she went missing. They soon confirmed that Jasmine and little Aaliyah were last seen at the family dinner on April 14th, 2019. And at that time, everything had seemed completely normal. On April 15th, 2019, security cameras at a grocery store in Calgary captured footage of Jasmine Lovett shopping with little Aaliyah as usual. In the video, Jasmine appeared calm and natural, paying at the self-checkout counter while Aaliyah sat quietly in the stroller. There was nothing unusual about the scene. However, just one day later, things began to take a puzzling turn. On the morning of April 16th, at 7:12 a.m., Robert Leeming dropped Aaliyah off at daycare as usual. But at 4:46 p.m., when he returned to pick her up, the staff noticed that Robert's name was not listed among those authorized to collect the child. This was a crucial detail, as only individuals pre-approved by the parent were allowed to do so. To be permitted to take Aaliyah, Robert had to call Jasmine, and she personally confirmed over the phone that he was allowed to pick her up. After that, Jasmine and Aaliyah were never seen or heard from again. Several silent days passed until April 18th, when something strange surfaced. Jasmine's credit card was used to place a food delivery order. Although investigators couldn't determine who made the transaction, whether it was Jasmine herself or someone using her card, the details suggested that someone was either acting on her behalf or deliberately trying to create the illusion that Jasmine was still alive. At this point, Robert Leeming became the central focus of the investigation. He was the last person known to have been seen with Jasmine Lovett and little Aaliyah, making it impossible for police to ignore the possibility of his involvement in their mysterious disappearance. Genevieve, Jasmine's sister, provided investigators with key information. The relationship between Jasmine and Robert had gone through multiple breakups and reconciliations, marked by ongoing tension in their shared home. Those details quickly made Robert a person of significant interest. On April 24th, 2019, police decided to conduct a welfare check at his house in the Cranston neighborhood. However, when they arrived, they encountered something strange. The officers knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no response. They tried several more times, and the prolonged silence made the situation increasingly uneasy. While waiting, one officer noticed that the note Jasmine's mother had left days earlier was still taped to the door, a clear sign that no one had entered or exited the house during that time. But what puzzled them even more was the front window. It had been covered with a sheet of cellophane, the kind typically used for wrapping gifts. It was the only window blocked off, preventing anyone from seeing inside. That unusual change raised serious suspicions that Robert might be trying to hide something. The officers kept knocking, ringing the bell, and waiting in tense silence, the air so heavy it felt as if something was deliberately being hidden inside the house. While scanning the area, one officer noticed a wet car trunk liner placed on top of the air conditioning unit out front, as though it had just been washed and left out to dry. Nearby, the garden hose was still running, suggesting it had recently been used to rinse something, likely that same liner. This discovery reminded them of the damp sneakers Jasmine's mother had seen by the door days earlier. Everything seemed to point to the same conclusion: a hasty, thorough cleaning. But the question was, cleaning up what? As they continued observing closely, the officers realized the house wasn't abandoned at all. There were signs someone was still living inside, moving things around, and tidying up. However, without a search warrant, they couldn't legally enter. The door was locked, and every window was covered, making it nearly impossible to see inside. Still, the officers refused to give up. They called in the Calgary Fire Department for assistance. When the ladder truck arrived, firefighters positioned it and tried to peer through the upper windows, hoping to spot anything unusual. But before they could get a clear look, the lights inside suddenly switched on, and just seconds later, Robert Leeming appeared at the front door. That moment immediately put the entire team on high alert, as it became clear that he had been inside the whole time, deliberately keeping silent.
I was sleeping. I sleep with plugs in and...
Hey, but we've been here for hours and hours and hours now, hey? Banging on your door and ringing the doorbell.
Calling your phone.
Again.
I've been drinking and smoking a lot, so...
Okay.
Okay, so she's not with her sister.
What do you mean?
Well, that's the reason that we're here,
Why do you think we're here?
is that the family's calling us saying we haven't heard from our daughter and our sister.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense?
Yeah,
Okay, why does that make sense?
because I haven't heard from her.
Noticing Robert Leeming's inconsistent behavior, the officers knew they needed to dig deeper. When asked about Jasmine Lovett's car, Robert claimed that she didn't drive, a response that immediately raised eyebrows. For an independent adult like Jasmine, it made little sense that she wouldn't have her own means of transportation. The officers also pointed out the note Jasmine's mother had left taped to the door, but Robert insisted he didn't know anything about it. The more they spoke with him, the more inconsistencies emerged. His vague, illogical answers and constantly shifting expressions all reinforced the suspicion that he was hiding something. To learn more, investigators began digging into Robert's past, and what they found painted a troubling picture. During his previous marriage, his ex-wife had accused him of being controlling and emotionally abusive, constantly belittling her, blaming her for everything, and making her live in fear. This pattern of behavior was one of the key factors that led to their divorce. Moreover, she revealed that Robert had collected various dangerous items, including knives and high-risk sports equipment, which made her fear for her own and their son's safety. As officers continued searching his records, they uncovered another disturbing report. Robert had once been investigated for animal cruelty. According to the report, he had taken the family dog to a park, tied it to a tree, and left it there without food or water. Fortunately, a passerby found the animal and turned it over to the Calgary Humane Society for care. This was a serious warning sign. People who show cruelty toward animals often have the potential to display the same cruelty toward humans. And Robert Leeming's past deeply concerned investigators. He had previously been charged with animal cruelty and admitted to 3 violations: causing pain to a pet, failing to provide adequate food and water, and not ensuring proper shelter. Although he didn't serve jail time, Robert was fined $5,000 and banned from owning animals for 10 years. However, his troubling history didn't end there. During the divorce process, Robert's ex-wife discovered several disturbing online searches that sent chills down her spine. One of them involved chaining a dog to a tree, a detail that directly mirrored the act he had been convicted of. But what terrified her even more was another search describing a mother and child who had perished in a house fire. Given Robert's previous acts of cruelty, his ex-wife couldn't help but fear that his violence might one day escalate toward people, perhaps even toward her and their young son. With all the troubling information about Robert Leeming's past, police realized it was time to take serious action. On April 25, 2019, he was taken into custody for formal questioning in connection with the disappearance of Jasmine Lovett and little Aaliyah Sanderson. When asked about the last time he saw them, Robert claimed that on April 17th, they had gone on a picnic together at Bragg Creek, a wooded area about a 30-minute drive from his home. After the outing, he said, the 3 returned home, and according to him, Jasmine sat on the sofa watching TV while he got ready for a personal appointment. He insisted that everything between them was fine and that there had been no signs of tension. However, when he returned later that evening, Jasmine and Aaliyah were no longer there. His story immediately raised suspicions among investigators, as Jasmine's family maintained that she and Robert were still in an ongoing relationship, not separated, as he had described. The contradictions in his account, along with his earlier suspicious behavior, led police to believe Robert was hiding something important, and that this disappearance was far from the simple story he was trying to tell. Investigators then contacted the woman Robert Leeming claimed he was seeing on the night Jasmine and little Aaliyah disappeared, a woman police referred to as Kate to protect her identity. During questioning, Kate confirmed that she had indeed been with Robert on the evening of April 17th, 2019, the very night Jasmine and Aaliyah vanished. As detectives continued their interview, more significant details emerged. Kate explained that she had met Robert online in February 2019, about 5 months after Jasmine and Aaliyah had moved in with him. They had gone out several times, and Robert occasionally spent the night at her place, suggesting that he wasn't hiding the fact that he was involved in another relationship. However, what stood out most to investigators was that Kate had never been to Robert's house. Each time she asked why, Robert told her his place was too messy and that he was living with a roommate. He even referred to Jasmine as a tenant, carefully avoiding any mention of their true relationship. These statements made it clear to police that Robert had been living a double life. Still, at that moment, investigators didn't yet have enough evidence to charge him directly in connection with the disappearance. As a result, Robert was temporarily released, but under strict conditions. His car and phone were seized for forensic examination, and police obtained a warrant to search his entire townhouse in Cranston. He was informed that he was not allowed to return to the property until the search was complete. In the days that followed, investigators combed through every detail connected to Robert Leeming. Data from his phone quickly revealed red flags. On April 23, 2019, the very day Jasmine Lovett and little Aaliyah were reported missing, he deleted about 30 photos of himself with the mother and child, along with several other images related to dangerous items. Location data also placed him in the Bragg Creek area, the same place he claimed they had gone for an outing. Acting on this, police expanded their search in the wooded Bragg Creek region, about 37 miles west of Calgary. There, they found a makeshift fire pit showing recent use, unlike a typical cooking site. Nearby, investigators recovered a child seat safety strap, a small pair of shoes, diapers, several torn pages from a children's book, and a DVD of The Jungle Book. K9 units brought to the scene quickly alerted to the presence of an accelerant, suggesting the spot may have been used to destroy evidence. Meanwhile, security footage from a gas station near Calgary captured Robert purchasing gasoline and pouring some into a small can, then immediately taking his vehicle for a thorough wash at an automatic car wash, an action indicating an effort to eliminate traces. When the search warrant for his home was executed, more troubling details emerged. The front door was braced with 2 long metal bars. The windows were still covered with cellophane, and several sections of wall appeared to have been scrubbed or repainted. Inside, officers seized a plastic hammer with a sand-filled core, a blue moving blanket, and a safe containing various dangerous items and boxes of ammunition. Among the evidence found inside Robert Leeming's home, several items left investigators completely perplexed. Most notable was a partially burned component from a dangerous device, along with infant toys, a prescription bottle bearing Jasmine Lovett's name, and even her shredded passport found in the trash. However, what baffled officers the most was the bizarre scene throughout the house. Raw strips of bacon were scattered everywhere, from the dining room to the garage, and even near the fireplace. One piece was draped over a chair, another lay on the floor, and the empty bacon packaging remained in the kitchen. The entire setup looked as if someone had deliberately tried to create a strange trail of distraction. Despite the house being filled with odd details, police still found no direct trace of Jasmine or little Aaliyah. As the investigation grew more intense, Robert suddenly appeared before the media, calmly giving interviews and insisting with confidence that he had nothing to do with Jasmine and Aaliyah's disappearance.
You were kind of the primary suspect in this homicide
I still
investigation. You still are. What are your thoughts about that, and what are your emotions right now? What's kind of going through your head?
It's very stressful, but I hope they will be found, and I hope we can move forward from this. No, we were friends, absolutely friends, and supported each other. I would like, obviously, for them to be found, and for me to be cleared of this.
Your relationship with Jasmine?
Good.
I mean, were you a boyfriend, girlfriend, or?
No, just good friends. Nothing alarmed me until, of course, I got arrested. So.
What happens with you right now?
I'm just gonna wait until I get a phone call to say that I can go home.
How are you feeling throughout all of this?
Traumatized, of course.
Is there anything else that you want to add to all this?
Yeah, if anyone sees her or Aaliyah, Jasmine or Aaliyah, please, let the authorities know. They said that they would be done with the property today.
and that I would be able to go back to the property. But
So you're hoping to sleep there tonight?
I hope to sleep somewhere tonight. Yes.
In the recorded interview, Robert Leeming appeared exhausted, slurring his words and seeming disoriented, possibly under the influence of alcohol or other substances. He complained that his life had become a disaster. People now saw him as a kidnapper or a criminal. His friends had turned their backs on him, and he had lost his job. Robert blamed the police, claiming they had destroyed his home during their investigation, leaving him with nothing but drinking to escape reality. He continued to insist on his innocence and said he had hired a private lawyer to prove it. However, those who knew Robert painted a different picture. One close acquaintance, who chose to remain anonymous, described him as short-tempered, easily provoked, and unpredictable, especially when confronted or under the influence of alcohol. Investigators noticed that this matched his behavior during questioning, further reinforcing their suspicion that Robert was hiding something. Still, with no direct evidence to charge him, they decided not to rush into conclusions. Instead, the investigative team devised a completely new strategy, a covert plan designed to test the truth Robert was so determined to conceal. On May 5th, 2019, police launched a new strategy, sending 2 undercover officers to approach Robert Leeming on a street near his home in Calgary. Their goal was to make him feel comfortable, lower his guard, and gradually coax out the truth. From the very beginning, Robert seemed more willing to talk than they had expected. The officers acted friendly, constantly flattering and boosting his ego, telling him they believed he was innocent and that the police were framing him. The praise quickly made Robert relax, and he began to open up. During their conversation, the officers fabricated a story, claiming that during the police search of his house, a neighbor had stolen a piece of evidence and secretly given it to them. Of course, this wasn't true, but it convinced Robert that he could trust his 2 new friends. They continued their psychological manipulation, inviting him out for beers to have a private talk, hinting that they could help him get rid of any evidence if needed. Feeling lonely, desperate, and craving trust, Robert agreed to meet them. Still, he occasionally grew suspicious, asking repeatedly whether they were police officers. Each time, they skillfully reassured him, insisting they had nothing to do with law enforcement and were members of an organized crime group. They told elaborate fake stories about their criminal dealings and how they could help him out of trouble, all while planting the idea that the real police couldn't be trusted. Throughout the interaction, they carefully exploited Robert's insecurity and fear, step by step convincing him that he was among true allies, when in reality, he was unknowingly paving the way for the truth to finally come to light. Eventually, the officers invited Robert to a warehouse they had set up, posing as the hideout of a criminal group to make him feel secure. Once he trusted them, they even showed him several firearms to reinforce the illusion, under the influence of flattery and the comforting sense of being understood. Robert gradually opened up, admitting to multiple extramarital relationships and a series of private actions. He then revealed that on April 17th, he had used his phone to search for a secluded area near Bragg Creek, taken the 2 victims there, buried them himself, and poured gasoline around the site in an attempt to throw off the scent of police dogs. Although his statements didn't yet explain every detail, this confession marked a major turning point, giving investigators enough grounds to expand the investigation further. Robert Leeming's efforts to conceal his crimes did not end there. He told the undercover officers that he had built a temporary fire pit to burn Jasmine and little Aaliyah's personal belongings, including the child's car seat, children's books, and other familiar items. His goal was to create a false scene, one that would make it appear as though Jasmine had left home with her daughter. He also said he covered the bodies with a thick layer of mulch, believing it would mask any odor and confuse police dogs. What particularly caught investigators' attention was his obsession with masking scent. When asked about the raw bacon scattered throughout his house, Robert casually explained that he had heard pork smelled similar to human flesh, so he thought it might interfere with the dog's sense of smell. The way he described it revealed a calculated plan, almost as if he had studied how to mislead investigators beforehand. He even bragged that his old vehicle was an advantage, claiming that if it had been a newer model, it could have been easily tracked. Finally, in a major turning point in the investigation, Robert agreed to take the undercover officers to the location where he had buried the bodies. Late that cold night, they drove together to Bragg Creek, where Robert pointed out the exact spot deep within the forest where Jasmine and little Aaliyah were found. Both were wrapped in a blue moving blanket, buried beneath the soil and covered with branches, shishes, and sawdust, just a few feet away from the makeshift fire pit where he had tried to burn away the last traces of his guilt. The moment Robert Leeming led officers to the Bragg Creek site sent chills down everyone's spine. The way he described the scene, gave directions, and calmly stood over the place where he had buried Jasmine and little Aaliyah left investigators deeply unsettled, as if he took pride in having deceived everyone for so long. Many offenders returned to the crime scene to relive their sense of control, and Robert seemed no different, almost boasting about what he had done. The information and evidence he provided were clear enough for police to place him under immediate arrest. Shortly afterward, the Calgary Police Service held a press conference confirming that the two bodies discovered in Bragg Creek were those of Jasmine Lovett and Aaliyah Sanderson.
At approximately 4 a.m. this morning, members of the CPS located the bodies of a woman and child in Kananaskis. Although formal identification must be made by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, we believe we have located the remains of 25-year-old Jasmine Lovett and 22-month-old Aaliyah Sanderson. On behalf of the entire police service, we would like to extend our heartfelt condolences to the Lovett and Sanderson families.
DNA test results left no room for doubt. The forensic report also revealed a heartbreaking truth. Jasmine had suffered severe head trauma from a strong impact, along with a secondary wound caused by a blunt object behind her left ear. Little Aaliyah had also sustained multiple serious injuries to her head, back, and spine, completely ruling out Robert's earlier claim that she had fallen. Both deaths were officially classified as homicides, paving the way for prosecutors to charge Robert Leeming with deliberate murder and putting an end to all previous attempts at denial or deception. On May 7, 2019, Robert Leeming was formally charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, marking a major turning point in the case that had shaken Calgary. Although prosecutors initially considered elevating the charges to first-degree murder, they ultimately concluded that there wasn't enough evidence to prove premeditation. But they were confident that the second-degree charges would still ensure the harshest possible sentence. By October 2021, Robert's trial began, and his defense team introduced a surprising strategy. He admitted to killing Jasmine Lovett, but completely denied any responsibility for the death of little Aaliyah Sanderson, showing an almost emotionless demeanor. Robert's lawyer attempted to construct a narrative of a tragic accident that supposedly occurred on April 17, 2019. According to their version, that day Robert picked Aaliyah up from daycare while Jasmine had not yet returned home. The two played together and watched the Wiggles, the little girl's favorite show. Then, while going upstairs, Aaliyah suddenly slipped and fell, hitting her head on the floor. Robert claimed she quickly regained consciousness and seemed fine, so he didn't seek medical help. He said the evening continued as normal. He fed her, watched TV with her, and then put her to bed. Later, he went outside for a smoke and made himself a drink. According to his story, Jasmine returned around 7 o'clock that evening, and by 9, when she went to check on her daughter, she found Aaliyah lying unresponsive in bed, a horrifying moment Robert described as every mother's nightmare. According to Robert Leeming's testimony, when Jasmine Lovett discovered that her daughter Aaliyah was unresponsive, she panicked and accused him of being responsible for the tragedy. It was that accusation, Robert claimed, that made him lose control. He stated that, in a fit of rage, he grabbed a hard object and struck Jasmine repeatedly until she collapsed, then used another dangerous item to ensure she wouldn't regain consciousness. Afterward, Robert said he wrapped Jasmine's body in a blue moving blanket, cleaned the scene, disposed of the blood-stained items, then calmly made himself a drink and went to sleep, behavior so cold and detached that it deeply disturbed investigators. In the days that followed, he buried both mother and daughter in Bragg Creek and burned everything that could link him to the crime. However, the forensic findings completely dismantled Robert's fabricated story. Experts confirmed that Aaliyah's head and spinal injuries were far too severe to have resulted from a fall. In addition, medical examiners found evidence of abuse on the child's body, a detail that destroyed the entire accident narrative. Based on this evidence, prosecutors believed that on the night of April 17th, Jasmine may have caught Robert in the middle of an unspeakable act involving her daughter. Fearing exposure, Robert silenced Jasmine and, in a panic driven by guilt and desperation, took Aaliyah's life as well. He then constructed the false staircase accident story to conceal the brutal truth of what he had done. The prosecution's theory aligned perfectly with what Jasmine Lovett's family had long noticed about Robert Leeming: his excessive and unsettling attention toward little Aaliyah. From picking her up and cooking for her to spending nearly all his time with her, his behavior didn't reflect the natural care of a responsible adult man, but rather something deeply disturbing. The family had described Robert as being unusually attached to Aaliyah, and with what medical examiners later discovered, that affection was clearly far from innocent. What particularly struck prosecutors was that Robert had never once denied causing Aaliyah's death in any of his conversations with undercover officers. He only tried to justify it as an accident and never claimed that he wasn't the one responsible. During the trial, prosecutors emphasized that if this had truly been an accident, Robert would have done everything possible to prove his innocence, especially since the idea of harming a child is something no decent person could calmly admit to. Yet he clung to one single version of events. Aaliyah slipped on the stairs, hit her head, and passed away in her sleep. That defense completely fell apart when digital evidence showed Robert had his phone with him at the time, despite claiming he couldn't call for help because he couldn't find it. Text message records also revealed that he had been messaging his lover Sated before the tragedy occurred, proving that instead of seeking help, Robert carried on with his personal life, while 2 innocent lives had already been taken by his own hands. Despite the many inconsistencies in his statements, Robert Leeming ultimately waived his right to a jury trial, allowing the judge to make the final decision. After reviewing all the evidence, the court found Robert guilty of second-degree murder in the death of little Aaliyah Sanderson, ruling that the injuries on her body could not have been accidental, but were the result of deliberate harm. The judge also emphasized Robert's behavior after the crime, choosing to drink and smoke instead of seeking help for Aaliyah, as clear evidence of his coldness and lack of remorse. With all the evidence presented, Robert Leeming was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years.
We feel that justice has been served.
The mother of Jasmine Lovett and grandmother to Aaliyah Sanderson, speaking after the sentencing decision of Robert Leeming, who killed the woman and her daughter. Given a life sentence Thursday, he'll spend at least 22 years in prison before he's eligible for parole.
Jasmine Lovett's family received the verdict with mixed emotions, grateful that justice had finally been served, yet heartbroken knowing nothing could ever bring Jasmine and Aaliyah back. Turning their grief into hope, they raised $25,000 for the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter and established the Jasmine Lovett Memorial Scholarship to help women who have experienced abuse rebuild their lives. In 2022, Robert filed an appeal, arguing that the medical examiner could not completely rule out the possibility that Aaliyah's death was accidental. However, the Court of Appeal dismissed his request, and on July 23, 2024, the life sentence was upheld. For Jasmine's family, this was not only justice but also a powerful reminder of the importance of recognizing and preventing domestic violence. They have continued their mission, raising awareness, supporting other victims, and keeping the memory of Jasmine and Aaliyah alive as enduring symbols of love, courage, and hope. And that is the heartbreaking story of the Jasmine Lovett and Aaliyah Sanderson case, one that shocked Calgary, Alberta, and left a lasting scar on the hearts of people across Canada. This story is not only the tragedy of a devoted mother and her innocent child, but also a powerful reminder that violence within relationships should never be underestimated. No matter how peaceful things may appear, sometimes the very places we feel safest can hide the greatest danger. The lesson this case leaves behind is clear. Always trust your instincts. Never stay silent in the face of control or abuse, and seek help whenever something feels wrong. Thank you for staying until the end of today's episode of True Crime Documentary, where we tell real stories with deep respect for the victims who can no longer speak for themselves. If you believe Jasmine and Aaliyah deserve to be remembered, please share this video, leave a comment in their memory, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can continue bringing you real stories with real lessons. See you in the next episode of True Crime Documentary, where justice and truth always find their voice.